a bunch of us got together when we heard the bridge, because the day the bridge stones first came in was a huge day, you know. After that it became routine. But that first day was a really big event. And McCullough was lined with people and everything, you know, to watch this thing roll into town. And we had gotten together and we decided we were going to steal some of it. We knew we couldn't steal the whole thing because they'd noticed that. But we thought, okay, we can get a couple of bricks out of this thing. And they had a compound yard over here they built, you know, just a chain link yard, no real security. And I had my first car, which was a 53 Chevy station wagon. And we figured, well, we can get some of these stones and throw them in the back of the station wagon, you know, and be gone before anybody knows what hit them. So we're all sitting there because we had to measure up what we were going to take, you know. And so we're all sitting there on the parade route, you know, and bigger than life, boy, here come the trailers up McCullough Boulevard. And these things were massive, massive. Literally the ground shook as it went by us. And I remember you could smell the bridge, you could smell London, you could smell the soot, the ocean, the Thames, you know, it was a pungent smell. Not unpleasant, it was just, you know, completely out of place for where we are. And the first stones rolled by us were those right there. Each one of those stones weighs 3 times as much as my car. These things, these huge double or like 8-axle trailers you see, you know, these great big things, they can only carry like 2 of them. And so we're sitting there on the car, you know, watching this thing roll by and go, well, I don't think this is going to work out, fellas. You know, we'll blow off stealing the London Bridge. My favorite readings were always books that were written by people in their time. In other words, not a historian's perspective, but a first person's view. So I went looking for stories that were told by people that were living here during certain eras. And if you study Arizona history at all, there's a few authors that everybody knows, and one of them is Martha Summerhays. And she wrote a book called Vanished Arizona. And it was published in the early 1900s. And it was about her time here with her husband, who was a officer in the United States Army towards the end of the Apache Wars. And it was her personal experience, and it was fascinating to read. So I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll write a book about Havasu. I wrote it from my perspective. When I was 13 when we moved here, and honestly, it wasn't my idea to move here. It was my dad's idea, my mom and dad's idea to move here. I thought they were crazy when we got here, but you know, I didn't have anything to say about it. So we moved here, lock, stock, and barrel, in February of 1965. There was somewhere around 600 people, and there might have been 20 homes. And that was pretty much it. There was no grocery store. Nearest grocery store is 40 miles away. For our family, it was 3 months. 3 months before we finally got running water. And it was another, I think it was 5 months when we finally got electricity. And then it was a year before we finally got a telephone. The economic base was the factory, the McCullough factory. When they started breaking ground here for everything, one of the first things was the factory. Because, you know, you got to have jobs to have a city. So he moved his factory out here, and they built it. He put like $2 million in building this factory out here. And that became the economic base for a lot of people. There were people, of course, that come out here for the same reasons they do today. Retirement was big back then, and it was cheap back then. Of course, it was very, very isolated. And then a lot of people came out just like my dad did, wanting to start a new life. Some people, I imagine, came out with you know, expectations of making it real big, and some did. I would imagine a lot of them, there was probably a few escaped criminals in that group somewhere, I would imagine, and some other people of dubious reputations, I'm sure. What was also interesting is, you know, a lot of this stuff I didn't learn till later, but for every And this statistic, as far as I know, is still true for Arizona. For every 4 families that moved to Arizona, within 1 year, 3 of them have left. And of course, that first summer for a lot of people, there's a real rude awakening if you're from a cooler climate, because it's hot here. It's hotter than Phoenix. And one of the hottest places on the United States. In fact, a record, I believe, was 128. So a lot of people just can't take the heat. So a lot of people would leave. But, over the years, it began to build. I think the reason they bought the bridge and brought it here was because they could. To make a very long story short, you might remember when Long Beach bought the Queen Mary. Well, McCullough and C.V. Wood, I believe it was. C.V. Wood was an amazingly talented man. And so they were there at that meeting talking about that, okay? Apparently, as the meeting was breaking up and they were all leaving, I think it was C.V. Wood, might have been somebody else, but it was one of them, offhandedly said, by the way, is there anything else for sale over there? Almost as a joke. And the guy says, well, as a matter of fact, I hear they're going to be selling the London Bridge. And so they said, okay, we'll look into it, and they did. And it was up for sale, sure enough. So they put a bid in for it and got it. Well, the bridge was all decked out. It had the big tents on it. You'll probably see pictures of those, and bands and parades and celebrities and all this stuff. Well, one of the things they had was a cage full of white birds, white doves, pigeons. And the deal was, of course, at the appropriate moment in the ceremony, the cage would open up and the birds would all fly up, and there would be this spectacular feathered experience. And that was the plan. Well, it was hot that day. It was around 105 that day, as I recall, and they sat out there for hours because the ceremony went long. And so they finally come to the part where they're going to set off all the stuff and the birds would come flying out. Well, by the time they opened the thing, half these birds were just about dead of thirst. So the cage flies open and a few of the pigeons kind of fly out, but most of them just kind of spill out and kind of stagger around on the bridge, kind of like they were drunk or something. And so it was a huge failure. We laughed our rear ends off about it. But the upshot is that before that, there wasn't a pigeon in this town, not one. And now we're infested with them. And we always thought, well, Bob and CV didn't get everything right, I mean, they missed on that one. But it was hilarious. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. The population just went through the roof quickly. Buildings started, quadrupling. People just began to flood here. I mean, it was, a lot more of attention, And today is more of a party town in many, many ways. It's also becoming more of a destination city, I think. A lot of tourists still come here to see the bridge, although I don't think as many as there used to be. Manufacturing, there's a lot more manufacturing now than there used to be. They make boats here, all kinds of things. Retirement, I would say, is probably another biggie. We do get a lot of folks retire here. On the big weekends, the big holiday weekends, the place is just a big giant party. All the young people come here and spring breakers and everything, and the place just goes a little crazy. It just gets crazy. In fact, most of the locals on those big weekends, we just stay at home. We don't even come down to the lake. It gets so crazy. You could, on a big weekend, you could almost walk across this channel on boats. Of course, a lot of people complain about the snowbirds and the partiers, but personally, I think it's great. Bring them on. I mean, we had our turn at the trough. Let them have theirs, and that's fine with me. And the snowbirds, I can't blame them because I've only lived Actually, I've never lived where it snowed. I lived where it was going to snow, and I left before it really snowed because it was too cold, and I wasn't going to live in snow. So I can't blame anybody for wanting to get warm, especially from Canada or any place else where it snows. So, and they bring money, and you know, they help the economy. So it's all good. It's all really good. Of course, it's hard not to be biased, but personally, I think this is a great place to live. It really is. I know that it's different from when we were young and kids, you know, playing, but I couldn't have grown up in a better place, honestly. After that first year, when I quit hating Havasu and began to love it, I began to realize, like I think a lot of us began to realize, that we were in paradise. You know, we were just in paradise. What I wanted, I guess, what I really wanted to do was preserve part of Havasu's early days, part of the history of Havasu, especially before the bridge, because there's a lot of conceptions out there that the bridge, that the bridge came and they built a town around the bridge, and that is completely wrong. The town was on its way already. It would have survived without the bridge, but when the bridge came, like I say, it changed everything. But I also wanted those memories to be kept. There's not a lot of us left now. I mean, living memory of the early days. You know, we're all going. And I think that should be saved, just like Martha Summerhays' book that was published, I think, in 1911. And, you know, I'd like it to stick around. To show and to tell somebody that might be interested, well, this is what it was like for this kid in this town. And I know a lot of people aren't going to care, who cares? But I know I did. I cared about Martha Summerhays and about John C. Ceremony and these other people, you know. So I got a feeling that there's always going to be somebody out there that will be glad that that story was told from first person, not from some, you know, historian in retrospect, but a first-hand experience.